All right, guys, so this is going to be the first lecture of many lectures on chapter 28. If you've taken a look, this PowerPoint has over 240 slides. A lot of it is anatomy, and I was thinking about skipping over those parts, but I just decided no, I'll go ahead and go through the anatomy just in case you guys need a little brush up before your lab practical, okay? So I'm not going to cut anything out of this PowerPoint. I might go kind of quickly, but I'm not going to skip over the anatomy slides because they've thrown the physiology in with the anatomy and I don't really want you to miss anything. So again, I'm not sure how many videos it's going to take to cover this entire chapter, but I will find logical stopping points along the way and then just keep picking up where I left off, okay? All right, so chapter 28, the reproductive system. So an interesting thing to note about the reproductive system, it is the only organ system that you actually do not need in order to survive as an individual, right? It's not essential to your life. However, it is essential for our species to continue. And again, it does interact with and affect other organ systems. So the male and female reproductive organs, their job is to produce a reproductive cell. Now, a reproductive cell is going to be different from a regular cell in that we're going to reduce the amount of DNA in the reproductive cell by half. And we're going to learn about that's a process called meiosis. So we're going to produce these special cells. They're sometimes called gametes. They're called sex cells. And so if each of the two sex cells, male sperm and female egg, have half the genetic material, then when we bring them together in the event known as fertilization, we're just restoring that new cell to its full amount of DNA. It's back. One half equals one whole. Okay? Other things that the female and male reproductive organs have to do is they are part of the endocrine system and they're going to be secreting hormones that have to do with sexual function, sexual maturation of the gametes, and direction of the sexual function. Okay, so your reproductive system's job is to make sure that the human species continues. And from the time you reach sexual maturity until, if you're a male, you die, or until you're, as a female, you go through menopause, your body has one goal: make babies, make babies, make babies, make babies. And so your body will go to extreme lengths to make sure that your genetic material contributes to progeny that will outlast you. So even though we have birth control methods and things, I just want to stress to you guys that your body's goal is always going to be to produce a healthy baby. Okay, so the reproductive structures we're going to be looking at, in general, the part of the body that makes the sex cells are called gonads, and they are going to make gametes. The gametes are the sex cells. Now, in particular, the gonads for males are called the testes, and in females, they're called the ovaries. The male gametes are called sperm, and the female gametes are called eggs. We also have to have ducts that are going to move the gametes to expel, for the male, expel them out of the body, or for the female to transport the gamete to the place where the baby will grow and develop, which is the uterus. We're going to have accessory glands that are going to make fluids. Those fluids help carry the gametes, help nourish the gametes, and help prepare conditions so that the gametes have the best chance of fertilization. And then we're going to have structures around the perineum that are known as external genitalia. Okay, so the reproductive tract is the pathway from where we form the gametes all the way until we deliver the gametes out of the body, or in the female's case, deliver the baby out of the body, okay? So ways that the chambers and passageways that connect, that are going to be the passages that the gametes travel. Male and female reproductive systems are functionally different. Females only produce one gamete in every 28-day cycle, okay? So even though the process of meiosis we're going to talk about, there should have been possibly 4 viable gametes, in the females, she ends up prioritizing one of those gametes over the other 3 and develops it to a mature ovum that can be fertilized. And then if it is fertilized, the resulting fertilization event produces a zygote. That's a fertilized egg. And then her body is going to be responsible for keeping that zygote inside and nurturing and growing it into a fully grown baby. The male has the totally opposite. The male is trying to go for volume, and it produces 500 million sperm a day. Now, another point I'm going to stress over and over again, how many sperm does it take to fertilize an egg? Hopefully you already know the answer, 1. So, a 500 million in one day to 1 egg. If the conditions are right, it is more likely to end up with a pregnancy, with a fertilized egg, than not. So we're going to start with the male reproductive system. And again, the organ that is going to be the gonad for the male, it's going to produce the male gametes. This organ is called the testis. It's going to make male hormones like androgens and testosterone. You can almost hear testosterone in testis, right? And it's going to mature the sperm and make sure that they are ready when they leave the body to be able to reach the egg. In the female, the gonads are called ovaries, and they will release 1 immature oocyte per month. And they're also responsible for producing hormones. And the gamete will travel from the ovary to the uterine tube. And this uterine tube, you may have heard of it called a fallopian tube, is going to deliver the oocyte to the uterus. If it gets fertilized along the way, then we'll start implantation. If it is not fertilized, well, then we're going to shed the egg and the lining of the uterus. And then the connection between the uterus and the exterior of the female's body is called the vagina. So, go back to the sperm first. We're going to do male first. The pathway of a sperm is from the testis to the epididymis, to the ductus deferens, also called vas deferens, through the ejaculatory duct, through the urethra. Okay, so that's the path the sperm is going to take. Along the way, it's going to get secretions from accessory glands, including seminal glands, 1 prostate gland, and 2 bulbourethral glands. So it goes 2, 1, 2. 2 seminal glands, 1 prostate gland, 2 bulbourethral glands. Now, by the time we combine the sperm with the secretions of those glands, then we have the entire product that's going to exit the penis, and that product is going to be called semen. So that's the sperm and all of these other secretions that are included. So, we'll start at the beginning again. The testes are almond-shaped spheroid organs. They're about 5 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, and they hang in a specialized pouch called the scrotum. Now, they need to hang outside the body because sperm development is actually ideal at a couple of degrees below body temperature. So the male body has a way of keeping the testes away from the body so that they're not kept all the way up at 98.6 degrees. And that is through the scrotum and through a set of muscles that are able to lift and lower the testicles up against the body if it's cold, or lower them down more if it is hot. And that helps keep the testes at the right temperature for proper sperm development. So the scrotum is a fleshy pouch that encloses the testes, and it hangs them down underneath the perineum. It's in front of the anus, but posterior to the base of the penis. So here, in this diagram, you can see here is the scrotum. And then inside this purple organ here, this big, long, egg-shaped organ here, this is a testis. This is where the sperm development is going to happen. So we're going to develop the sperm in the testes. And while I've got it here, I'm going to start going through the pathway. They're going to go from testes to this part, which is called the epididymis, into the ductus or vas deferens, and then we're going to go up into the abdomen. So we're going to be going through a hole through the muscles of the abdominal wall right in here, and that's going to be called the inguinal canal. Okay. And then you can see the back. We're going to go over the top of the bladder in the vas deferens, and then we're going to pass by the seminal glands, and then we're going to go through the prostate gland, and then we're going to go through the past Cowper's glands or bulbourethral glands, and then enter the penis. So we're going to have these structures that are connecting the testes. They're going to be the ductus deferens. We're also going to have some muscles. We're going to have blood vessels, and we're going to have nerves that are all connecting the testes to structures inside the body. And so they're going to form a structure altogether called the spermatic cord. We're going to have some connective tissue. We're going to have muscle, the ductus deferens, blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels. And so this entire structure called the spermatic cord has to go through a hole in the abdominal wall through the musculature, and that's called the inguinal canal. and then they go into the scrotum. So the blood vessels of the testes are the deferential artery and the testicular artery. And then we have, for the testicular vein, we have this thing called the pampiniform plexus. I am not going to ask you any of these vessels on your test. The nerves of the testes are the genitofemoral nerve that comes off the lumbar plexus. Again, I will not ask you this on the test. Now, you may have heard of someone getting an inguinal hernia. So where the spermatic cord enters into the bottom of the abdominal cavity, that's a gap in the musculature. So if spermatic cord can go in, then things that are in the abdomen can sometimes work their way out. And so an inguinal hernia is some of the intestines or other tissues of the abdomen that actually start to fall out through the inguinal canal. And of course, this is going to be more common in males because females don't have inguinal canals. It's a weak point in the abdominal wall, and sometimes it needs surgery to correct it. It can be very, very painful for the male. So again, these are all the structures that make up the spermatic cord. You can see I've got some veins, some arteries. Here is my ductus deferens. Here is the nerve, and there would also be some fascia and connective tissue in here. Now this is looking at the musculature that wraps up the spermatic cord and goes around the outside of the testes. So this is the musculature that has the ability to contract to lift the testes closer to the body if they're too cold, or lower them if they're too warm. And so we have two different layers of muscle. The muscle that's able to lift and lower the testes is called the cremaster muscle. And then we have another layer of muscle that's outside of the testes and between the skin of the scrotum and the testes. And that one is called the dartos muscle. And it's what gives the scrotum its wrinkly appearance. Now, inside the scrotum, it's one pouch, but it has a divider down the middle. And that separates the two testes from each other. And that divider is called the raphe of the scrotum. And that gives each of the two different testes a little scrotal cavity to rest in. Now we have a serous membrane called the tunica vaginalis. I know it's weird to see the word vagina in the testes, isn't it? Tunica vaginalis is the lining of the scrotal cavity, and its main job is to reduce friction. So it has a parietal layer and a visceral layer. Again, the dartos muscle is in the dermis of the scrotum and makes the scrotum look wrinkly. And the cremaster muscle is skeletal muscle that is able to lift and lower the testes closer or farther away from the body. So again, normal sperm development requires the temperature to be 1.1 degrees Celsius lower than body temperature. So we have the scrotum there to keep the testicles away from the body. That gives us optimal sperm development and best chance of creating babies. Remember, your body says make a baby, make a baby, make a baby. Now, on the testes, we have the tunica albuginea. That's on the outside. So first we have the tunica vaginalis is the lining of the scrotum. Then we have the tunica albuginea. And it's going to be collagen fibers because it's a connective tissue. Okay. It's also going to go into the testes and separate it into these little lobes. So the separations are called the septa testis. And it's going to give the blood vessels and lymphatic vessels something to hang on to. So inside each of our testes, we have it divided into lobules, and we have long coils, about 800 per lobule. These are called the seminiferous tubules, and inside these tubules are where we're actually going to develop the sperm. Each of these tubules is about 80 centimeters long, and if we were to lay all of them end to end between both testicles, we'd have over a mile of tubule. They connect to an area called the rete testis and straight tubules. And then the final part is called an efferent ductule that is going to carry the sperm to the epididymis, which is the next structure after the testes. Okay, so this is a cross section through the testis. And so each of these is a lobule. And this coiled tube here is the seminiferous tubule. And then they're going to come up to this section here. And these are the rete testes, as you can see on this side labeled. We have straight tubules that lead to the rete testes. And then we're going to go up through the efferent ductule. And then up here is the epididymis, which is actually a separate structure from the testis. Okay, and here's a micrograph. If you hear my daughter screaming in the background, I'm so sorry. Again, I'm at home making these videos. She's downstairs with our chickens right now. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. Okay, I'm going to keep going unless she starts to really scream loud, and then I'll stop. Histology of the testes. So, connective tissue capsules surround the tubules. We have areolar tissues between the tubules. And then, okay,